In this video, we're going to talk about how to find and work with high-quality clothing manufacturers. Whether you want to be the next big fashion entrepreneur or you simply want to sell everyday clothing items online, finding the right premium clothing manufacturer is critical to your success. The clothing industry is extremely competitive and dominated by major brands with big budgets, celebrity endorsements, and decades of experience. However, the rise of e-commerce and boutique clothing lines have seen many aspiring fashion entrepreneurs find success online, and there's no reason why you can't do the same. If you're watching this video, your clothing business idea is probably already well developed. You have a niche in mind and perhaps some clothing designs or ideas for the clothing items you'd like to sell, but you're not quite sure where to start or who to trust to get your clothing manufactured. I want to assure you that finding a clothing manufacturer doesn't have to be difficult or scary. Now let me guide you through the process of finding quality clothing manufacturers so that you can take your ideas and make them a reality. By the way, if this is your first time watching, welcome! Here at SaleWho, we are dropshippers and business owners ourselves who have scaled multiple 5, 6, and 7-figure businesses throughout the team. And using our knowledge and experience, we have helped hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs grow their online businesses with our e-commerce tools and our expert online education. Before we get started, I want to remind you guys of the lucky draw this month, where you'll have a chance to win a 1-year free membership to SaleWho Directory or SaleWho Dropship. All you have to do is comment below and tell us, what is the biggest issue you're currently trying to solve in your dropshipping journey? At the end of the month, we'll choose one lucky winner and announce that person in our latest YouTube video. Now let's talk about how to find and work with high-quality clothing manufacturers. The first thing you should ask yourself when launching a clothing business is, do I really need a clothing manufacturer? If you simply want to sell clothing items online, then you may be better off starting with dropshipping and sourcing products from a clothing supplier. That way, you don't have to worry about the production side of things, as you can choose pre-made clothing items from a catalog. You also don't have to buy a whole lot of stock that might not sell. It can save you a lot of time, money, and unnecessary risk. Be sure to check out SaleWho Dropship if you're interested in dropshipping clothes. However, if you have a unique idea for a new range of clothing, or you're a fashion designer wanting to launch your own brand, then you will need to work directly with a manufacturer. By the way, the SaleWho directory provides you with manufacturers from all over the world, and you can filter for them based on their location. There are pros and cons of working with a clothing manufacturer that you need to be aware of before we dive into them. So let's talk about that. The pros of working with a clothing manufacturer is that you can produce unique clothing items and you can establish your own brand. You can even generally sell items at higher prices. And you also have greater control over branding and marketing. The cons are that you have to make a significant investment up front. You also have to buy bulk items that might not sell. You have greater legal obligations and you expose yourself to more risk. If you have decided that working with a clothing manufacturer is indeed right for you, you can now start looking for one. Let's now discuss what you need to look out for in a clothing manufacturer. If you're getting started on your clothing business journey, there are a few things to consider before you choose a clothing manufacturer. The first thing is whether they can make your product. This may seem like an obvious question, but it's an important one. Not all clothing manufacturers are capable of producing all types of clothing. For example, outdoors or exercise clothing often requires special materials, such as polyester or waterproof fabrics. You need to be sure that the manufacturer you choose is able to make the clothing products that you want. It's best if you try and use a manufacturer that specializes in making the clothing that you want. If you're starting a clothing business that sells stylish summer dresses, then you would do well to work with a dress manufacturer that has a lot of experience with dresses. Just like if you want to sell luxury clothes, then you might like to work with one of the luxury clothing manufacturers. The second thing you want to consider is whether you want to work with domestic or overseas clothing manufacturers. You need to decide whether you're going to work with local manufacturers in your country or area, or overseas manufacturers. Typically, this means choosing between manufacturers in the United States and Europe or manufacturers in Asia, typically China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Vietnam, India, and Bangladesh. It's quite rare to find economically viable clothing manufacturers in smaller countries. But if being locally made is important to you, you might be able to make it work. So let's say you're in the US or Europe. If you go with domestic clothing manufacturers, there are a lot of benefits to working with them. Firstly, it's much easier to meet with the manufacturers, inspect their factories, and discuss your specific needs without a language barrier. There are more stringent labor regulations and better working conditions, and consumers are becoming more conscious of these things, and being locally made can be a powerful selling point. You'll also have the benefit of faster shipping times, which keeps customers happy. The quality also tends to be higher. However, all of this comes at a financial cost. It typically costs more to use domestic manufacturers in the US and Europe, although you will also have grounds to charge more for your clothing items. Now, if you choose to work with overseas clothing manufacturers, the main benefit of doing so is lower cost. They are almost always a lot cheaper, which is why so much clothing is made in China. However, this is typically because labor standards and working conditions are unregulated, which is something you need to keep in mind. It's also more difficult for you to visit and inspect factories. And while overseas manufacturers can produce quality clothing, this relies on you choosing a reputable manufacturer. Also, shipping times are much longer when the products are being sent internationally. However, if you're buying your clothing items in bulk and shipping them yourself, this isn't a major issue. The other benefit is that you can often have a greater range of options with overseas manufacturers, especially when it comes to fabrics, styles, etc., and they're more inclined to bend over backward to do business with you. The third thing you need to consider is what the minimum order quantity is, or MOQ. When you're working with a clothing manufacturer, you need to know what their MOQ is. That means the minimum number of items you need to purchase in a single order. The MOQ could range from 200 to 2,000 items or even more. It's very rare for manufacturers to not have an MOQ. This is important for you to know because if you start working with a manufacturer and place your first order and they tell you that you need to buy 1,500 units of the swimsuit, you might not be able to afford it. Also, it's not a good idea to buy 2,000 clothing items if you're not sure you can sell them all. If you do that, you may be left with excess stock that's difficult to move. In short, make sure the MOQ is manageable for you before you start working with a clothing manufacturer. The fourth thing you need to consider is whether they can provide product samples. You need to make sure you try before you buy. There's a reason there are changing rooms in clothing stores, and that's because people want to know what they're getting before they commit to buying it. The same goes for your manufacturer. If you're getting a manufacturer to produce clothing items for your business, you want to make sure that you can get samples before committing to a large order. This is important because if something's not quite right, you can make adjustments until it is. Imagine getting an order of hundreds of jackets that you've designed only to find that they don't quite fit right. The easiest way to do this is by bringing it up in your communication early on. Most manufacturers will be more than happy to provide samples, usually for a modest fee, but it's up to you to get them to commit to it from the beginning. You can communicate with your manufacturer through the SaleWho directory, by the way. The SaleWho directory allows you to email your supplier all from within SaleWho, and you can see all the necessary details about them so that you can be sure that they are reliable. The fifth thing you need to consider is what are their fees and shipping costs. In the excitement and rush of bringing your clothing business to life, it can be easy to overlook basic due diligence. All it takes is 1 or 2 lines in an email to ask the manufacturer if they have an additional fee you should know about and what their shipping costs and times are. This is really important information that can help you decide whether you work with that manufacturer or not, so make sure you address it early on. The sixth thing you need to consider is what is their production capacity. This is something you might not think about until business is booming, but still important to know. When you're just getting started with your clothing line, you're probably focused on getting your first order and making sales. But what happens if business goes better than expected and your clothing sells out quickly? Can you rely on your manufacturer to produce your clothing quickly and at a greater capacity moving forward? This is why you should ask your supplier about their production capacity. Make sure they have the ability to notch it up if needed. Also, ask about turnaround time or lead time, meaning how long it takes the manufacturer to fulfill your order. You don't want to have to wait weeks or months for an order, missing out on potential customers and sales in the process. The seventh thing you need to consider is what is their standard of quality. Unfortunately, this isn't something you can ask a manufacturer in an email and take their word on it. However, you can do your own research by reading reviews of the manufacturer online, visiting the factory if possible, and ordering samples. Remember that the quality of your garments determines your reputation, so you want to be sure that your manufacturer produces clothing to a high standard. You will be better off paying a slightly higher price for higher quality goods than risking your reputation just to save a few dollars. The eighth thing you need to consider is what other brands have they worked with. This is one of the best ways to test the reliability of a manufacturer. Ask them what other brands they've produced clothing for. Then look at the websites for those brands. Are they successful? What's their customer feedback like? Contact the owners of those brands and ask them how they found working with the manufacturer. Have they had any issues? Are they happy with the quality? There's nothing like real-world testimonials to provide you with a peace of mind to proceed with the manufacturer. Now that you know the 8 things you need to consider when finding a manufacturer, we can talk about where to find reliable clothing manufacturers. It's relatively easy to find clothing manufacturers online. The tricky part is knowing which ones are reliable and which aren't. Here are a few tried and true ways to find clothing manufacturers. The first way is through industry meetups and trade shows. Trade shows, also known as trade fairs, are exhibitions where manufacturers showcase their products and services. It's a great way to meet manufacturers in person so you can discuss your specific needs. The same goes for industry meetups. You can't beat talking with a manufacturer face to face. It helps to build trust and confidence and establishes a more personal business relationship. The next way is through SaleWho's verified supplier directory. The SaleWho wholesale directory has more than 8,000 low-cost suppliers and 1.6 million products and brands. There are more than 200 clothing suppliers all around the world inside SaleWho. And the best thing about SaleWho's supplier directory is that all of the manufacturers have been verified by SaleWho staff, so you know they are trustworthy. It just takes one click to see all of the manufacturer's contact information, including phone number, email, and physical address, as well as details such as their trustworthiness score, product range and quality, and customer service information. The next place you can find suppliers is in online marketplaces. You can find manufacturers on popular Chinese-based online marketplaces such as Alibaba and AliExpress. Manufacturers often sell directly via these platforms, so if you come across a listing that's similar to the clothing product that you want to make, you can try contacting the seller and asking if they are a manufacturer. You also have the added benefit of being able to read reviews. However, you do need to be wary of scams and still do your due diligence using the considerations we talked about earlier. Now that you know where to find your ideal supplier, we can talk about how to work with your clothing manufacturer. Starting a clothing business may seem like a pretty daunting process, but it is possible. I will now tell you step by step how to work with your clothing manufacturer. First, you need to pick a niche. Picking a niche is a fundamental first step. It's important to ask yourself, how am I going to stand out and who are my clothes targeting? Busy moms who want comfy yoga leggings? T-shirts that represent aspects of a certain country? Naturally, when you're picking your niche, you will need to narrow down the type of clothing you are selling. You'll also have to decide on the material you're going to use and even the design. The next thing you need to do is develop your brand. There are many things you will want to think about when developing your brand. For example, it is important to identify your target audience, the products you want to make, your unique point of view, logo, colors, etc. Creating a business plan is a good idea during this step. The next thing you want to do is research your competition. Now that you have a pretty strong idea of the type of clothes you are going to sell, it's a good decision to do some research on your competition and look at how you're going to stand out. To start, take a look at how they are promoting their clothes and their brand tone and voice. It will give you some idea of how you can differentiate yourself. The next thing you need to do is create a budget. Before you get started creating your clothing line, it's important to know what you are in for. Think about all the costs involved. For example, the costs of working with your manufacturer, shipping, legal fees, website costs, etc. The next thing you need to do is understand your legal requirements. Every country has different requirements. Check out the business license regulatory body in your country or region for more information on this. The next thing you need to do is design your clothes. Lots of manufacturing companies have in-house designers to work with. You could use one of these or work with a designer of your choice. Alternatively, you could design it yourself and use softwares like Adobe Illustrator to make your designs. Next, you can work with your manufacturer. This is a big step on its own. You will want to communicate with a few different manufacturers to make sure you are working with one best suited for you. Remember, manufacturers can offer full production package or cut, make, trim. FPP means they are with you the entire way from design to patterns to producing the final garment. When working with your manufacturer, make sure you take into account the information mentioned in this video, like communication, MOQs, samples, and timeframes. Also, you will likely need to provide them with a tech pack. Finally, you can take your clothes to market. Once you are happy with your test product and have committed to a full product run, you'll want to start the process of taking your clothes to market. This process involves setting up your online store, pricing your products, marketing, packaging and shipping, creating a returns policy, and handling customer issues, and working with your manufacturer to make sure production is never an issue. Once you've done all that, you're ready to start your clothing business. That's it from me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this type of content and want us to make more of it. Also, if you want to find pre-vetted, reliable suppliers for your online store, you can sign up to SaleWho. I'll leave a link to sign up in the description box below. Want to know how to start a jewelry business instead? Check out this video here to learn the 5 critical steps to starting a profitable jewelry business. Want to know the different ways you can price your products? Check out our 11 pricing strategies YouTube video here. Thanks everyone, see you in the next video.